we have a new moon and a partial solar eclipse coming on the 21st, or possibly the 22nd if you live in the Australasia uh, area. So, what can we expect from this? I think we'll see a lot of um, news around world leaders in particular. We'll start with that. We'll look in a different video about how this will affect us as individuals, the collective, and so on. But I want to do just global leaders that came to mind when I was scrying and meditating on this. And there were five that really stuck out at me as being effective. Of course, one is Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Gang of Three. I think they'll all feel the effects. Netanyahu, in particular, I think will feel a lot of negative effects. Uh, the other two is Kash Patel, the FBI director in the United States, and the UK Prime Minister Starmer. I think he, in particular, is going to have a troubled next month or so. So let's just kind of dive in, I guess, and let's start with Starmer. So Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK. He's never been particularly popular. Uh, his percentage-wise, his party barely won the popular vote in the last election. Um, the UK is just kind of, you know, having a tough time of it. So what can we expect? So I think in particular, it feels like a tension. Um, it's like, two people playing tug of war, except for he's really playing tug of war with himself. And it's like he's trying to bend this way to please one group, and he's trying to bend this way to please another group. And in reality, he's not pleasing any group. And, I think Donald Trump's visit to the UK isn't going to help matters. I think I think there's just a lot of problems for him. I'd really be surprised if he lasts for much longer. Now, the way elections are done in the UK is very different than in the United States. So I'm not exactly familiar with when there has to be the next election. I know an election can be called at any time, but by the prime minister. I don't know if he would call one earlier to try to show he has support. I don't see a no confidence vote, but at the same time, I say I don't see one. I sort of feel one. Um, so it wouldn't surprise me if that happens sometime before the first of the year. Um, I do think we're going to see what I'm going to call an economic wobble um, in the world economies. Don't make financial decisions based on my readings. They're just tarot readings. I could be right, I could be wrong. I don't think that the wobble lasts long, but I think it's quite effective at um, really shaping the narrative around certain leaders doing a terrible job with their respective economies. Yeah, messages about money here, the Knight of Pentacles, and circles of support around money, the Three of Pentacles. I think in particular the way that he's handling um, Trump, Putin, and Netanyahu is a really tricky situation. It's a very tricky situation for every world leader. Um, and the Queen of Wands, people are really scrutinizing his decision making. Yeah, and the environment around, we get the Five of Cups, which of course is about loss. And I just think he's losing support every single day. People are getting angrier and angrier. Um, And, the Four of Swords, I don't think he's one. I don't think he's sleeping well, which is why he mumbles over his words sometimes. But I also don't know that he's in the best of health. I don't I don't think he has like a terminal illness or anything like that. I just think he's super stressed out. And excuse me. When people are stressed out, not sleeping well, it's hard to make good decisions. And I think that's part of it. Certainly not excusing any of his poor decision makings. The Hermit card, he's losing support. He feels quite isolated. Um, the Six of Pentacles, giving and receiving things of value. I think he's pretty much spent all his political capital. I don't think he has anything left. I don't think he could convince Parliament to do anything at this point that is going to be considered big enough and bold enough to please the people. And so I don't know. I just don't see him sticking around for very long. I don't even think he knows what it's going to take to make people happy or to fix the problems that are going on in the UK. I don't think he's alone, by the way. I don't know that anybody else knows either. So um and everything's moving quite quickly against him. So we get messages about money and particularly about his mismanagement of it. Everything is just moving away from him. Um, you know, all the little tricks of the trade to get political things done, nobody's interested anymore, and people are quite critical of him. I do think that Putin, Netanyahu, and Trump pose a big problem for him. Uh, this would be true of any prime minister in the UK or Canada or anywhere else. They're just tricky energies to deal with, tricky people to deal with because they're, you know, not exactly honest. Uh, I do think that he loses the prime ministership at some point in the relatively near future. I mean, I wouldn't go as far to say this year, but I'd be really shocked if he was there by, say, June of next year. I would be really shocked if he lasts that long. Um, and he will lose. I mean, he'll step down and his party might win, but he'll lose for sure. Um, he's already feeling the pressure to to call an election, I think. And, he doesn't have the answers. I don't know that anybody does, to be honest with you. The energies are very bizarre. So, what's true and what's not true isn't exactly clear. This time that we're living through is about illusion versus truth. It's about what's real versus what's fake. It's about who gets to say what is real. It's also, about just extreme dissatisfaction with government. It's not just in the United States, it's all over. It's just the energy. Everybody is mad at their governments. The UK being no exception. I think we'll see some turning on Prime Minister Modi in India here shortly as well. And maybe we'll take a closer look at him later. I don't think many people come out of it unscathed. I certainly don't think that. Underneath here we have the devil. Yeah, just toxicity. It's it's just what's there. Mis and disinformation. Nobody really knows what's true. Is the economy good? Is the economy bad? The truth is it's probably somewhere in the middle. Um, you know, the things cost too much. That's true. Wages aren't keeping up with inflation anymore. Um, so with the spy in the camp, there's somebody that's going to undermine him at some point, in the hopes to gain stability and power. I'm not sure who that is because I've been so busy following US politics and Israeli politics that and Canadian politics a little bit as well. It's hard to keep up with the whole world. So um, I'd be really shocked if he's prime minister still. Yeah, no, he walks away. I mean, he calls the election that ousts him, right? He calls the election, stands down. He's the one that decides to leave. Um, that's the way it's going to work. Okay, let's look at Kash Patel. Now, this one's an interesting one. Um, Nobody trusts this guy. It's interesting. The truth, the Ace of Swords is underneath here. Um, Nobody trusts him. That's every time I try to get into his energy, it is uh, I don't know. It's like the used to be on Nickelodeon, they used to have these kids shows when I was young, and there was one where they would slime all these people, like slime would drop from the ceiling. He feels like that slime. Um, like he's really malleable. He could be easily persuaded to say one thing, even if he believes something else. It's just a really hard to discern type of energy. We get the Ten of Wands popping out. He's under a lot of pressure too. Definitely huge dissatisfaction with the FBI in the United States. Um, More so than people even realize, because a lot of us don't even talk about it because there's so much else that we're mad about. Um, but now MAGA's even mad at the FBI because of the Charlie Kirk assassination. So, um, or young people, I should say. I don't know if MAGA is the right word there. Young conservatives, the misguided youth. Okay. What do we need to know about Kash Patel? What do we need to see the Five of Pentacles in the water? It's a feeling of loss, a loss of control. The people underneath him don't trust him. They're not necessarily even following his orders as directed. I don't know that he's even really in charge. Um, yeah, new leadership's coming. He's not going to be there that long. I don't know if he gets fired while Donald Trump is president or if he gets fired after that. But I don't think he's here. If he makes it to 2026, it's not far into 2026 before he's gone as well. There's a tipping point here, the Wheel of Fortune. Everything's very precarious. Perhaps is something he could do to save himself, but I think we're going to get more and more bad news out about the Kirk assassination and how the FBI failed. That it's going to become almost impossible. And the Chariot card, move forward movement, erratic. He's gonna. Don't be surprised if he starts acting erratic. Although, who would know, right? I mean, he's always seemed fairly erratic to me. The King of Wands. I think somebody comes out and publicly asks for his to resign. I don't think it is Donald Trump. I don't think it is Vance either. I think these are a group of senators, and I think it's a bipartisan group of senators. Because it's not going to take too many Democrats to jump on board with any Republican that wants them gone. So uh, I think he too is feeling quite isolated. And this is protection for the people of the United States and of the world, because I do think the FBI has been, being handled quite ineptly. I just don't think it's functioning the way it's supposed to. Yeah, complete and utter downfall. The Ten of Swords and abuse of power, the presidency. I mean, really, he should have never been picked for this position to start with, right? That was the abuse of power. In judgment. People are just getting really quite angry with him. There are five, six major arcanas. All these are major arcanas. And then we've got the ace and the 10. It really doesn't look good. So I think eventually we get some new leadership. I think he feels quite isolated and alone. And I think he knows people are quite upset with him. Not the generic um, public, although that's true too, but the people that are working underneath him. And you can only fire so many people before there are no people left. And he's already got lawsuits for people that he's already fired suing him. So I do think he experiences this taking this job as his downfall. It really is. He'll never recover from it. It's very similar to Sarah Palin type energy. After she resigned from being governor of Alaska, there was no hope for her to ever regain anything. Um, and here he is, moving forward erratically because he doesn't really know the direction to go. Why? Well, because he's got the wheel of fortune in the environment around. He's kind of standing on its tiptoes, could fall one way or the other. I do think there are calls for his resignation. He should have never been there in the first place, and him leaving will be a good thing for the world. So I think all of that's true. Uh, yeah, emotional messages, and he too, he's just crumbling under the pressure, the Four of Swords. And I think, it wouldn't shock me if he knows he's going to get fired if he just doesn't decide to walk away. That really wouldn't shock me. Either way, he will not be the FBI director. I don't think much past the new year. Okay. All right. What about Putin? And then we'll move to Netanyahu and Trump. Okay, so how's this solar eclipse time period going to affect Putin? I do think we see a loss in his reputation. I think a lot of the people that are falling for the propaganda, like the older generations, are slowly starting to realize that this isn't true. The things he's saying isn't true. Uh, People really can't afford groceries, contrary to what the Russian propaganda machine is putting out. Um, Things are quite expensive in ratio to their, average salaries. So, I mean, groceries are basically the same price in Russia as they are in the United States, except for in the United States, the median salary is like, 70,000. And in Russia, the median salary is like 18. So it's something along those. I mean, I kind of made up those numbers, but they're in the ballpark. Okay, so what's going to happen with Putin? I do think he has health problems as well. Those possibly get exposed. I definitely think that he loses some power. That doesn't mean that he's out, right? He's not going to be out of power anytime soon. I think that happens when he dies. I don't think there's any other way that that happens or becomes completely incapacitated. People are getting angry, fired up. The Queen of Wands. We get temperance in the environment around. People just want predictability. They don't want these big currency fluctuations. Now they've gotten better, the currency fluctuations, but they're still there. And now that there's talk of China and India and some of the BRICS nations trying to form a new currency, I think Russia's in that group as well. I I don't know that that helps the ruble. I just don't think it does. Because, all those currencies are very complicated. The ruble used to be a little bit more predictable, but, you know, the rupee and the yuan are somewhat tied to it as well. People are passing judgment on him inside the country. Of course, they have to be cautious about how they um, display their disdain for him, but it is disdain. The Five of Wands, people are angry. They want a new beginning. They want him gone. But, how exactly that happens is a different story. Um, It could be, a spy in the camp type situation. Always said I've seen more car bombs coming in the future in Russia, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's an assassination attempt at some point. I'm pretty sure there have been ones that have been kept undercover. Um, People can't keep up with the cost of living. That's the main reason why his reputation is going down. They just can't keep up. And, you know, the seed's been planted that maybe it'd be better with somebody else in charge. And he can try to conjure up all the mojo he wants. It's just not going to work. So people are angry. They want a new leader. And it really doesn't matter what he does. That's the way people are going to feel until he's gone. Now, that doesn't make him leave because that's just not the way the power structure works. But people are having a hard time keeping up with things in life. They really want something new. And I mean, they're manifesting in a way to speak. If you look at this card, I mean, they're pleading to the heavens, hoping that something new happens. And the environment around, people remember when it was a more moderate time before the war or the invasion. Um, the invasion, the war there, the battle there is certainly not helping people's opinions. I do think there have been seeds planted to try to get rid of him. It's not the first time I've said that. I don't think they're successful, or at least I don't pick up on that. I'll certainly look at that later, but people want a new beginning. I mean, the Ace of Cups followed by the Ace of Pentacles. I mean, that's what people want. And it's there. It's gonna happen. How long's he there for? I don't know. It doesn't feel like it's a super long time. Like it feels like it's definitely before the end of the decade, but probably more like sometime in 2027. That would be my guess if I had to guess. That's what it feels like, a few years. Okay, what about Netanyahu? He's under the most pressure here with the energies the way that I see him. I'm not an astrologer. I don't claim to be one. Um, but I do think there's immense pressure on him from this eclipse period, along with just some bad energy. Um, and unfortunately or fortunately, depending upon your philosophical bent, I guess, I think Netanyahu brings down parts of the US and world in the world's eyes as well. So and the US and Israel are super tied together, the two cups there. Um, you know, Rubio talking about how there couldn't possibly be a two-state solution. The world's not going to accept that. The world's been doing the opposite. They've been voting to recognize Palestine. That's not going to convince anybody. This is going to make people mad. So I don't know exactly what they're doing. I mean, other than the fact that they're just not very smart, unfortunately. Okay, so what do we need to know about Netanyahu? I think he'll be going as well. It does feel like a very transformative period. I do think this takes, several years to play out. I don't think we're talking about everybody being gone in 2 weeks. Nothing like that. Maybe all of them are gone in 3 years, something along those lines. Now, I don't want to lump the UK Prime Minister in with this other group that we're talking about. He's just under pressure for other reasons, not because he's, you know, killing people. Well, at least not intentionally. Yeah. I'm sorry, Netanyahu. What cards are full? What times then? What do we need to know about Netanyahu? And then we'll look at Donald Trump. I mean, his downfall is coming. It's the Ten of Swords, the Death card, the Four of Swords, the Five of Swords, all those types of energies around, illness and being wounded and complete and utter downfall and death and the end of a dark cycle, they're all there. I think he thinks he's logical, which is somewhat laughable, but I actually think that's what he thinks. Um, Now he's got his circles of support. They're behind the scenes, though. I think Putin and the Trump, and I know it's an unlikely relationship, Putin and Netanyahu, but I guarantee you, when history is finally done investigating this, some deal was done, and it had to do with getting, election interference in the United States so that they could do what they wanted to do. He's also quite isolated. Uh, the things are going on behind the scenes here. We get Victory. I'm not sure whose victory this is. I don't think it's his. It's a crossroads period for the country of Israel as well. Quite defensive. Yeah, legacy, the Ten of Pentacles, and the Death card. I mean, that's not surprising. I think he thinks he's logical. I think victory is achieved when he is no longer with us, or at least not in power. Um, when this dark cycle ends, when the Gaza bombing stops. He's quite defensive about this mission, what he's calling a mission. A lot of us call it genocide. It's making him quite isolated. He does have some world support, but there are things going on behind the scenes, crossroads, and uh, talks of legacies. And, his legacy's coming to an end, and it's not going to be a pretty one. He's not going to be remembered well, at least not on a world level. History is often wrong. Yeah, we get a new beginning and people just being really angry. And I do think that Israel kind of sets up some better guardrails, so that 32% of the country isn't taking the whole country to war. But we'll see, or at least to this extent. I don't think much of the people of Israel are behind what's exactly going on. All right, what about Donald Trump? Now, I think he's in quite ill health. Now, I did see when I was meditating and scrying earlier today, him stumbling over some words, and when he's in the UK, I think this gets quite a bit of media attention from the world media. I do think this is quite an embarrassing event for him. I think they'll regret it happening or agreeing to do it. I do think that some things will get canceled. Um, whether it's a presser or something like that getting canceled. I just don't see him like coming out of this trip to the UK very well. I think he leaves tomorrow on the 16th, I think. Yeah, definitely get the Ten of Swords in the water. It's the Ten of Swords from a different deck that I'm seeing, but which is far more graphic about being stabbed in the back. Well, I don't know what to say. I mean, I try not to be hyperbolic and I try not to be yeah, hyperbolic. I just it just feels like this is coming, And I know somebody commented, oh, the death card isn't literal death, blah, 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 blah. But in readings like this, it is literal death. Uh, it doesn't have to be. And certainly in a generic reading, it's hardly ever that. But I don't know. Here, that's what it feels like. I think it's illusion and delusion that he can pull this trip off. Here he is in his own reading. This is my card for him, the King of Pentacles. This is my card for dementia. The Five of Swords, being wounded in battle. The Emperor, the President, abuse of power at the center of the reading. I think that's why it's so humiliating. I think he gets called out on things that the US media is just not willing to call him out on. And I think it's something else. The Hierophant, this could be the stairway to the afterlife, so to speak. This church, the government, the Pope. The Pope's already spoke out against him. Again, there's this prosecutorial type of hate of him for his abuses and, empathy for those that are suffering because of him. And the Nine of Pentacles, this is a wanting for things that we need. So we do get death of the Emperor, which is what we need. Maybe that's hyperbolic, but I think that's the correct interpretation here. That's what it feels like. And do I think this happens on the UK trip? Maybe. I don't. Timing is so hard. I think it happens before the end of the year for sure. Uh, I would think before Thanksgiving, but I've always felt October is the month, but I don't claim to be that good. Um, people hate him, especially people in Europe. They hate him. Why? Because he abuses power. Who's abusing power? He is. The people around him are crazy to think that this trip is any good for him. They're absolutely crazy. His cognitive decline is going to be on full display. This is what I was talking about, seeing him stumbling over his words, just not making sense. We get the church, the Pope, the courts, him thinking about his afterlife. And I think we'll see the media siding with people that he's been harming. And I think we'll hear some questions in regards to that. If they do hold a presser, which I'm somewhat doubtful of, that'll really make him angry. And then we'll see that on full display. Yeah, the Chariot card, erratic movement, the swaying back and forth on the red carpet that we saw a few weeks ago. Expect that. There's something wrong with his heart. There just is. Congestive heart failure seems to fit the bill. And, the world needs to be put back into balance. When does that happen? It happens when temperance comes. When does temperance come? Temperance comes right after death, right? Death is 13, temperance is 14. So I think that reading pretty much speaks for itself with respect to Trump. So Starmer uh, not doing good in the UK. I don't think this is intentional. I just don't think he knows how to govern. Uh, I think Kash Patel's under a lot of pressure in the United States as the FBI director. I think Netanyahu's also under a lot of pressure. I think Putin is, but just based on the way that the autocracy works there, it's not as threatening to him. And I don't know, Donald Trump, I'd be surprised to see him around for much longer. So, all right, thank you for watching. I'll be back with another video soon.